Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Sophie, and today we're going to dive into a really important topic: common mistakes in vocabulary. Whether you're just starting to learn English or you've been speaking for a while, there are certain mistakes that many people make when using words. We'll talk about those today and give you some tips on how to avoid them.
Hi, I'm James. I'm really excited to be here with Sophie and to explore this topic because these kinds of vocabulary mistakes are actually really common. And the good news is, once you understand them, it's pretty easy to avoid making them. So we're going to go over everything from the wrong word choices to using words in the wrong context. And we'll give you some tips to sound more natural and confident when you speak.
Exactly, James. And I think a lot of these mistakes happen because English has so many words that look or sound similar, but their meanings are actually different. One of the most common mistakes is using false cognates. For example, in many languages, there are words that look very similar to English words, but have completely different meanings. Have you had any experience with these, James?
Oh, absolutely. False cognates can be a huge source of confusion. One classic example is the word actually. In English, it means in fact or really, but in many languages like Spanish or Italian, actual means current or present. So if you say actually when you mean current, you're going to confuse people. That's definitely something to watch out for.
Right, and the same thing happens with words like sympathy and empathy. A lot of learners confuse these two, but they actually have very different meanings. Sympathy is when you feel sorry for someone's situation or express support, like when you say, I feel sympathy for your loss. But empathy is when you actually understand and share someone else's feelings. So it's really important to know the difference.
Exactly. Another common mistake I've seen is using borrow and lend incorrectly. These two words seem similar, but they are used in different ways. If you want to take something from someone temporarily, you borrow it. For example, can I borrow your pen? If you're giving something to someone temporarily, you lend it. For example, I can lend you my pen. I've heard people mix them up a lot, especially in everyday conversations.
That's such a great example, James. Another one that's often confused is make and do. It's really tricky because both can describe actions, but they're used in different ways. You make things like make a cake or make a decision, and you do activities like do homework or do the dishes. A lot of learners end up saying things like, I'm doing a cake, which is incorrect.
Oh, I've definitely heard that one. And another pair that can trip people up is watch and look. The difference is a bit subtle, but important. You watch something when you are paying attention for a period of time, like when you're watching a movie or watching a sport. But you look at something for a moment or for a brief period, like when you say, look at that beautiful sunset, or look at that picture. So remember, watch is for things that require time or attention, and look is for a quick glance.
Exactly. Those small distinctions can really change the meaning of your sentence. And I think another area where learners tend to make mistakes is with countable versus uncountable nouns. For example, saying, I have three furnitures instead of I have three pieces of furniture. Furniture is uncountable, so we don't add the S at the end. It's easy to make this mistake, especially with things like advice or information, which are uncountable as well.
Oh, absolutely. The S at the end can be tricky for many people. And this mistake can be especially confusing because there are exceptions in English. For example, you might say, 3 books, 3 apples, but then something like furniture doesn't follow the same rule. It's just something to keep in mind and practice with.
Totally. And another thing that I see people confuse a lot is prepositions. Prepositions are those little words like on, in, at, by, and with that can really change the meaning of a sentence. One big mistake is saying things like, I am good in tennis, when the correct phrase is, I am good at tennis, or using on instead of in for locations, like I live on New York instead of I live in New York. These little mistakes can make your sentences sound off.
Yes, prepositions are a big one. And I think another mistake that a lot of learners make has to do with phrasal verbs. These are combinations of verbs and prepositions that often don't translate directly into other languages. For instance, saying get up when you mean wake up is a mistake. Get up means to physically rise from a seated or lying position, while wake up means to stop sleeping. It's a small thing, but it can make a big difference in how natural you sound.
Great point, James. I've definitely seen people mix up phrasal verbs all the time. And along with that, it's easy to confuse false friends, those words that look similar in English and another language but have very different meanings. For example, in French, actuellement means currently, not actually. And this leads to mistakes like saying, actually, I'm at the store, when you meant currently, I'm at the store.
Right, and even simple words like eventually and possibly can get mixed up. Eventually means something will happen at some point in the future, but possibly means there's a chance something might happen. So saying this could eventually happen when you mean it could possibly happen can confuse people.
Yeah, that's a great example. Another one I see a lot is the confusion between affect and effect. This one is tricky because they sound similar, but they're used in very different ways. Affect is usually a verb, meaning to influence something or someone, while effect is a noun, meaning the result of something. For example, the weather can affect your mood, and the effect of the weather on your mood is real.
That's a classic one. And while we're on the subject of common mistakes, I think a lot of learners make errors with overusing adjectives. For example, saying, I am very tiredly today, instead of I am very tired today. Tiredly isn't a correct form in English, even though it might sound logical. We often don't need to add adverbial forms in these situations.
That's a really good example, James. And speaking of adverbs, another issue is the placement of adverbs in sentences. It's common to see mistakes like she sings beautifully, really, when it should be she really sings beautifully. Adverbs need to be placed in the right spot in the sentence to sound natural, so that's something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about something that can be confusing even for native speakers: subject verb agreement. A lot of non native speakers struggle with this, especially when the subject is complicated. For instance, saying the team are playing well when the correct way is the team is playing well. Even though team can be made up of many people, it's treated as a singular subject in English.
Right, subject verb agreement is tricky, especially when we use collective nouns like team, group, or family. It's important to remember that in English, the verb always agrees with the subject of the sentence, not with the number of people in it. So it's the team is practicing or the group has decided.
Exactly. And while we're on the topic of subject verb agreement, let's not forget about tense consistency. It's easy to slip into changing tenses when you don't mean to. For instance, yesterday I went to the park and I see my friends there is incorrect. It should be, yesterday I went to the park and I saw my friends there. Keeping the tenses consistent helps your sentences flow better.
That's such a good point. Tense consistency can be tricky, especially in long sentences, but it's so important for clarity. And lastly, one common mistake that a lot of people make is overusing filler words like, and, you know, it's totally normal to use these in casual speech, but using them too much can make you sound less confident. It's good to try and reduce the use of fillers, especially in more formal situations.
Exactly. And that's something that gets better with practice. The more you're aware of these little mistakes, the more you'll start to catch yourself and correct them. And as we mentioned earlier, being consistent and practicing regularly is key to mastering vocabulary and avoiding these mistakes.
Yeah, so whether it's through reading, listening, speaking, or writing, just keep practicing and stay mindful of the common mistakes we've mentioned today. As always, don't get discouraged if you make a mistake. That's part of the learning process.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We hope this episode was helpful in identifying and avoiding some of those common vocabulary mistakes. Keep learning, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.